It wasn't me, I'll pretend. Sprung. I've got the puberty blues.
I was the teenager from hell.
It does get very irritating at times to be constantly compared to Kathy.
It seems that Gabs has become very intellectual and I'm deeply shallow. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Caroline Jones. Hard to believe, but it's 23 years since two Sydney girls wrote a book called Puberty Blues. The book scandalised most adult Australians. The pair were best friends, Kathy Lette and Gabrielle Carey. But after the book they fell out and went in opposite directions. Kathy embraced fame, while Gabrielle chose to live among life's battlers. In the ensuing 2 decades, they avoided all contact. But now, Puberty Blues is being re-released, here and in the United Kingdom, putting Kathy and Gabrielle in touch with each other again.
And then the great.
And then the great.
6 hours.
6 hours.
You couldn't say I was shy. I think I'm probably the mouth from the south.
There's nothing else for it. I'll just have to put my feet up.
I'm very opinionated. I shoot from the lip all the time, which gets me into a lot of trouble. I think growing up as a girl in Australia,
Thou shalt not commit adultery.
you either become a doormat or you become, a loudmouth and show off, because we have to try so much harder to get heard above the men.
But it's so hard with so many temptations flung into a girl's path.
The boys I grew up with in Cronulla disproved the theory of evolution. They were kind of evolving into apes. It would have looked much more natural if they squatted on their haunches and groomed each other, And we girls were just second-class citizens. We lived vicariously through them. We were sort of nothing more than a life support system to a vagina. And it was terrible. But we hadn't heard anything about feminism. As a surfy girl, the terms for sex were rooting, tooling, plugging, poking, stabbing and meat injecting. It's not exactly a Shakespearean love sonnet. And the terms for women were bush pigs or swamp hogs. If you were very good looking, you got called a glamour maggot.
Oh, well, surfy girls have this special walk. First of all, the hips have to be out a little bit like that. And shoulders down. Don't swing your arms. It's got to be cool. And so you sort of just
And
walk like
you
this.
don't look up, just flash little look.
We used to fold the towel and fetch the Chico roll. We were slaves and watch the boys and give them ego massages when they came in from the beach. We belonged to them as an example of how sexist they were. They used to get us to cut their names out in paper, sticky tape into our stomachs, then sunbake so we get a tan tattoo in the shape of their names. So if I ever get cancer, I'm going to have a melanoma called Bruce. The woman I wrote Puberty Blues with, Gabrielle Carey, was my best friend. And if we hadn't had each other, we may never have got out. Because a lot of that peer group ended up on heroin or in prison.
I think we started writing together at 13. I remember when Kathy and I first met, and almost from that day onwards that we were virtually never out of each other's company. Yeah, it was just that click. I mean, it's happened to me several times in my life. You just meet someone and you instantly bond and you know that this is going to be really special. Kathy's family were fairly conventional and conservative. Her father worked in what was then called the PMG. Her mother was a headmistress. My own family was very unusual. My parents were separated. They were both very obviously lefties.
And I was absolutely intrigued because her father was a professor, a really intellectual man who could convince you in 5 minutes how God could just as equally be a fridge or a cockroach as a deity in the sky. I mean, he was just breathtaking. And her mum was the most liberal and caring person. She was involved with all sorts of political parties and prisoners' rights and all sorts of stuff like that. So I was just kind of gobsmacked being a little suburban girl at this amazing world, liberated world they inhabited.
After about a year, Kathy's parents decided that I was a bad influence. I left school at 15, and that was not long after a friend and I had organised the first strike at Gymea High School. We wanted to play football, and girls weren't allowed to play football. In a way, I expected myself to be a rebel, partly because I'd been brought up in this family that was kind of anti the system, anti-convention.
What an amazing game, mister! Congratulations! What a great goal by Alex. That was fantastic.
You know why Daddy's such a good rower?
He went to Oxford.
That's right.
Kathy left school a little bit later than I did, and I can be blamed for that. We found
I want you
a
all
flat.
to pretend that we're in an American sitcom.
We moved in there when we were 16.
Caring and sharing.
She must have had an amazing amount of strength and guts to actually do that. Although my father would have preferred me to stay on at school, he helped us with the rent. Whereas with Kathy, she was basically really outcast from the family, and that must have been very hard.
I was the teenager from hell. I have no doubt about it. So I disappointed them terribly. And I just can't imagine the grief I put them through. And I know that they can't wait until my kids hit puberty so they can just sit back and gloat and watch me jump through the parental hoops.
I sneaked to the drive-in with my boyfriend Joe. I must admit, didn't see much of the show. I looked out the window, but I looked out too soon, 'cause there in the car behind was my Auntie June. I said, "Don't tell Mama, I'm a big girl now." Sprung.
From about 17 years of age, we were the Salami Sisters.
Sprung. I've got the puberty blues.
The idea of it was that we were doing something spicy and meaty.
Tried garlic on my back attack. My grandma.
One of our main mentors was Spike Milligan.
He was our just ultimate hero. And we used to just hitchhike around the country following him. I mean, he didn't quite know what to make of us, but he was like a saccharine daddy. You know, he was like a sugar daddy with no sex, because he used to put us up in hotel rooms and he used to take us out for dinner. And he read our first book called School Daze, D-A-Z-E. How witty were we? You know, and he was the first adult I'd met who talked to us on the same level and who said, "Yes, you've got talent, it's great, keep writing." And it was so encouraging.
Well, I had spoof all over my jeans. My mother asked me if I dropped my ice cream. I said, "No, Mama, I'm a big girl now." She won't believe me. No, she won't believe me. "No, Mama, I've turned 13.
Our songs were satirical slices of life, really, about the sex war mainly. And we got a little cult following going, and then we got a newspaper column in the Sun Herald.
Kathy Lette and Gabrielle Carey don't aim to shock. They say their novel, like their weekly newspaper column, is based on accurate reporting. But what they have to say is bound to shock many of their parents' generation.
When we were 13, the coolest things to do were the things your parents wouldn't let you do. Things like have sex,
Smoke cigarettes,
sneak off from school,
go to the drive-in,
take drugs.
and go to the beach.
The beach was the
Puberty Blues is totally autobiographical. It's all true, and this is, of course, still the shocking thing for everybody.
Everybody around here bongs on.
It was good for your reputation as a surfy girl if someone said, "Oh, did you see her?" You know,
She was so out
She
of
was
it,
tripping.
yeah.
Oh,
When the book came out, both my parents were very supportive. I think Kathy's parents were appalled by the book. I remember Mrs. Lette saying, "You know, you have to think of my social standing in the community." And it just sounded like such a ridiculous statement to us then, but of course, just imagine the local headmistress's daughter writing this story. Whereas my parents didn't have any social standing to worry about, really.
Danny would drop me if I didn't root for him.
Christ!
That. 2, 3.
Kathy and I fell out probably just months after Puberty Blues came out.
Where did you learn about sex?
Where everyone else learns about sex, not at school, that's for sure.
Back of the car or down the...
It was pretty nasty sort of breakup, and essentially we haven't spoken to each other since.
What sort of lines do they feed you?
I suppose I was questioning the whole idea of what a celebrity or a personality is.
Men have these two women that they want.
I felt there had to be some substance behind whatever we went on to do or say. Kathy was a lot more opportunistic than I was. She saw every occasion as an opportunity to further her fame or her status as a personality. I felt that she was selling herself. I felt that, and that she would sell herself to anybody for fame and fortune, and I didn't like it, and I didn't want to do that.
What I remember about Gabs is that she was fiercely intellectual and always striving to make herself a better person.
What kind of girl are you looking for?
Spunky one?
Those intense female friendships you have in your teens, you can't be welded at the waist forevermore. You've got to grow apart. It's unnatural not to. You can't be psychological Siamese twins forever. So it was only, it was predictable and very natural that we went our separate ways. It'd be kind of sick if we hadn't, really. So it was heartbreaking because we were best buddies, and I missed her terribly. I lost all my confidence for quite a while after we stopped working together and being best pals. But, looking back, it had to happen.
I bet we're dropped. Who cares? Yeah, who cares?
About that time, I met Terry Haley.
Visit with Terry Haley?
Hang on a second.
Terry was in jail for abduction, armed robbery, escape, rape. Well, Kathy wasn't impressed with me going off with a prisoner, and that's really understandable. She was more interested in going off with a winner than a loser. I don't think everything should be blamed on one's upbringing, but my father was a really forceful person, and he was always talking about the worse off, and what irritated me about it was that he didn't mix with them. In some ways, falling in love with a prisoner was my way of really announcing I side with the loser. I side with the underdog. I side with the underprivileged. That's where I live. That's where I want to be.
Inside a prison, you can't afford to trust anybody at all, and in particular anyone from outside. So it took me quite a long time to begin trusting Gabrielle.
My next book was Just Us, and that was all about my relationship with Terry. I suppose I wrote it as part of the campaign to have him released.
I think he's wonderful. I think he's really compassionate. I think he's been through an amazing amount of suffering, and I think someone can either become very bitter through those kind of experiences, or they can learn a lot and they can become very compassionate, and I think he's come through in a very positive kind of way.
My line was that criminals are created, and that I believe that Terry wasn't essentially bad. He'd been institutionalised since the age of 8, had a violent father and a very unfortunate upbringing. After a number of years, probably 4 or 5 years, it all got too difficult, and I decided that I wanted to leave the country.
This is how you begin an article.
When we stopped writing together, McPhee Gribble Publishers dropped me and kept Gabs on. It wasn't a good time. I pulled myself out of that depression by writing journalism at first. And I must say my boyfriend at the time, Kim Williams, really encouraged me. And then after that, I kind of had the courage to do another book, so I did Girls' Night Out. But it was also published in America, and it was seen by some executives at Columbia Pictures, and they rang me up and said, would I come over and write sitcoms? They're all written by about 10 people. They lock you in this windowless padded room, which I called the gag gulag. And it was like being a stand-up comedian, except, you know, sitting down, churning out jokes all day. But I mean, it was fantastic training for me. You learn not to be precious about your material. You learn a lot about comic structure and timing and things. I mean, I had 9 Jewish guys and me. I mean, I'm so Jewish now. Look at me. The hair, the hands, the jokes, the guilt gland that throbs. I feel guilty that I'm not Jewish. That's how Jewish I've become.
When I was 24, I went to Ireland and absolutely fell in love with the place.
Your Christmas dinner for threepence. Jack Fleming embezzling and gambling it all, then smuggled off to America.
It was my ideal life. It was full of people who sat in pubs and argued and took philosophy seriously, also took religion seriously.
Donnybrook Fairmore in their line.
In Ireland, I became a Catholic. In my family, it wasn't a thing that was ever discussed. I mean, people who believed in God were just dumb, and they just hadn't realised that, you know, being an atheist was the way to go. After a year or so in Ireland, I went to live in Mexico. At that stage, I was interested in the lefty side of Catholic liberation theology. In Mexico, I got married to Chino. He was a coffee worker. He had a little finca, a little field of coffee plants. We lived very, very simply. I was 27, I think. You know, had that overwhelming, oh, must have a baby, just couldn't bear not being pregnant. Just sort of came over me. And so I was very happy when I got pregnant. And Bridgie was born on a full moon in that little village in a little house with a little Indian midwife, and it was all very easy and beautiful and ideal, and she was gorgeous and it was lovely. I'd been wanting to come back to Australia to visit the family for a while, and we thought that Christmas of 1987 would be a good time. When I got to the airport, my brother and sister told me that my father had just committed suicide. It was really shocking. I couldn't understand his timing. Why, at this moment, I'm just arriving home with my newborn baby, why would he do it? I thought for some reason, you know, that maybe I had been the trigger for it. And so that just led to more searching and a lot of investigating, and eventually that's how I wrote In My Father's House. It's very ironic. What led to his suicide was the 1987 crash. In opposition to all his ideals, he invested a whole lot of money. And I think there were two things. There was the actual losing of the lot of money, which would have been dreadful, but also realising, oh my God, what have I done? I've become the epitome of everything I've always hated. And it's that self-revealing and that he couldn't bear the self that he'd become. And I think he felt that he couldn't hide it from me.
We're friends and relatives and neighbours, ladies and gentlemen, who live in the picturesque town of Melanoma on the Bronze Coast of Queensland.
Kathy and I met courtesy of the ABC. I was doing a hypothetical back in 1988, and I'd persuaded Joe Bajelke-Peterson to come on the programme. And I wanted to find someone absolutely the opposite of Joe, you know, young, attractive, non-corrupt, to put next to him. And Kylie Minogue came to mind, and I got a telegram from the ABC saying, Kylie can't make it, you'll have to make do with Kathy Lette, who they thought was the opposite of Joe. And so we met.
It's very interesting to listen to all you people, very interesting. I don't agree with you, Doctor.
And we fell in love across a crowded studio.
Kathy Lette, would you try to stop me?
I would tackle him and give him a few quick, swift kicks while he was down there, but I'd try and stop him.
And we sat up that night and talked till 5 a.m, and then we just couldn't stay apart. And about 2 weeks later, he asked me to get married. It was very romantic, you know. It was it's pathetic to be a satirist and come out as being a closet romantic. I mean, oh, please shoot me. I was married to Kim and I behaved very, very badly, but he's forgiven me now. And Jeff was going out with Nigella Lawson. When I got to England, the tabloids had a field day. You know, how could good-looking, gorgeous, talented, brilliant QC dump good-looking, gorgeous, beautiful, brilliant daughter of someone very, very famous for loudmouth, colonial nymphomaniac? And I was like, how dare they call me a loudmouth? Please, you know, I have my pride. They were incredibly cruel to me.
We came back to Australia when Bridgie was 2, but we've kept in contact with Chino. In my book, The Borrowed Girl, what I wanted to do was show people what it was like to live in a third world village. So, Bridgie, how's the dance going?
We've nearly finished.
There was this lovely sense of leisureliness. Can I have a look at my stars?
No.
The downside of living in a third world village was poverty and health. I remember the moment that I decided I can't stand this any longer, I've got to come home. And that was when I opened Bridget's nappy and it was just, had a big writhing nest of worms in it.
Just done the same with a sofa, which looked magnificent in the shop. And
when I was on holiday in France, I said, Kate, we went to visit this.
It does get very irritating at times to be constantly compared to Kathy.
Max has just got back from...
I'm sure every writer wants to be read by as many people as possible.
Literary lionesses.
So to that extent, I would say that I'm jealous.
So I took him lap dancing to Stringfellows.
My way of writing is about trying to make sense of things.
No.
Kathy, I think, wants to entertain.
She's laid an egg today. Amanda laid an egg, a literary egg.
People's idea of Kathy is often moulded by the antics she goes through to sell her books. We live in a society, unfortunately, where virtue is not its own reward. I think her books are playing the role of the jester through the ages. They do have a serious moral purpose.
They wave their naked bottoms in your face.
She's actually quite puritanical. It's not commonly known that beneath the exotic exterior there beats a rather conservative, almost Puritan heart. I mean, she hates drugs and gambling and laziness and drinks, other than champagne, of course. Pulling it out.
So this is the scene that I've got where they've been... this is a first draft, so don't...
I guess we have this one matrimonial fetish that we like to interfere with each other's prose.
Also, for I care passionately about things, of course.
That you get in career.
I always try and write the book I wish I'd had when I was going through something.
The law is always a good deus ex machina.
You just want...
I look at the Threepenny Opera.
And I also write out of a deep sense of rage. I mean, whatever's driving me mad at the time, be it the way mothers are treated, or be it, you know, natural childbirth, or be it the way Australians are condescended to, or be it the ageing process for women.
I don't think we can have that.
I read a couple of Kathy's short stories.
I thought that was a really good joke.
No, it doesn't work.
And to be perfectly honest, at that time I was thinking she's wasting her talent. Now I think it's none of my business.
And also déclassé and de trop. I wasn't sure which one.
Her actual literary uniqueness is to do things with words that no one else manages to do. I don't think your readers would. It's extraordinary how many times Kathy is quoted in the latest Oxford English Dictionary as having invented words or phrases or having put verbal jokes into common currency.
Yes, I thought that to learn and to become wise, one had to struggle a bit. I settled down with an Australian man who was also a very devoted lefty, and we lived a perfectly ideologically sound lefty existence, and everything we owned was second hand, and we lived on very little money, and I had my son Jimmy. And then I got very sick of that existence. So these days I've done the complete turnaround. I've established for myself a very nice middle-class existence. I have a new partner, Peter, and we live in a very comfortable house, and we drink lots of red wine, and I don't feel guilty about it at all.
It's so good after 3 days.
It seems that Gabs has become very intellectual, very much like her dad, and I'm deeply shallow. Yeah. I pretend to be on the surface anyway.
Let's just try and have a good rally, just one.
I'm sure we still have a lot in common. I think both of us still have a lot of passionate feelings about women's rights. And we're both mums.
One of the great things about the re-release of Puberty Blues is that Kathy and I have started emailing each other. I feel that the fallout has probably gone on long enough, so my feelings are that the next time Kathy's out in Australia, I'd love to have a beer with her.
I'd love to see Gabs again. It'd be great to see if we could remember any of our old song lyrics, maybe have a stroll up Cronulla Beach and compare our melanomas called Bruce.